Kristina is the co-executive director of the Farmers Land Trust and is a farmer, communicator, and community coordinator who believes that our connection to the soil is directly related to the health of our bodies, economy, and society. With over a decade of farming, communication, fundraising experience, Christina enjoys using her skill sets to share photos, stories, and information in engaging ways which help to inspire change in human habits and mindsets, causing the food system, climate, and overall well-being of the world to improve. Christina has spent the last several years of her professional career saving farmland from development and securing it in nonprofit landholding structures that give farmers, stewards, and ranchers long-term and affordable access and tenure to it. Most of her work in the land access space has focused on equitable land security for BIPOC growers, addressing the inequities and disparities in how land is owned and accessed in this country. So without further ado, welcome, Kristina.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Today, let's confront a truth that has been buried beneath the soil of our nation for far too long, but that is slowly becoming unearthed. We stand on stolen land. At this very moment in time, over 98% of land in this country is owned by white people. And that is not an accident or a coincidence. This reality that we find ourselves in was created by many acts of violence and oppression and through a system of racism. Today, let's reckon with this truth, not as an act of historical record, but as a moral imperative demanding our action. The history of our nation is marred by the bloodshed of indigenous people who were forced off of their ancestral lands through deceit, broken treaties, and unimaginable violence. The very foundations of our nation are built upon the dispossession of indigenous people, whose cries for justice have echoed painfully throughout the centuries. The very foundations of our nation are also built upon the horrors of slavery, where Black people were treated as property, bought and sold, and then forced to toil on stolen land for the profit of their white oppressors. This history and reality has resulted in many would-be potential Black farmers not wanting to return to the land as a symptom of post-traumatic slavery disorder. And to those, I just want to say, although the land was the scene of the crime, the land was not the perpetrator. The legacy of slavery continues to reverberate throughout our society, manifesting in the persistent racial disparities that we see today in wealth, health, education, and most important to me in my work, land ownership. Even after the abolition of slavery, Black Americans faced insurmountable barriers to land ownership. There are countless stories, examples, and ways that Black people were excluded from and also had their land stolen from them from the days of the 13th Amendment and continuing through today. But I'm not just going to continue to stand up here and tell you things that you already know. Or that you should already know. And we don't need to linger in guilt or despair. Nothing productive happens there. It's not helpful to feel bad or resistant to change or to ignore the way that things are. One of the most important things that we can all do right now is to ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to live in? For me, that world is about honoring land and people and about building connections between people, plants, animals, soil, water, air, and all of life that sustains us in all directions. And so I'm always looking for ways to do that. I've come to realize that the land beneath our feet is not a commodity to be bought and sold and to make money off of. It is sacred ground that our collective ancestors once walked on. And it is the mother that will carry our collective children into the future. I've come to realize that we have a moral obligation to steward this land with care and to ensure that it is shared equitably among all who call this nation home. And so I work to develop new models of land ownership. Not in private, but in community. Not as a commodity, but as a resource. New models that support sharing land and honoring land and people. With a willingness to think differently and hold vision for beyond the status quo, we at the Farmers Land Trust have helped communities all over the country move from acting in transaction with land to being in relationship with land. We work creatively, understanding that all land and people are unique and deserve individualized options that allow for a multitude of goals and outcomes to be achieved. For a few examples, we work with individuals and communities to secure highly discounted options to purchase land in the name of land justice. You can sell your land without having to sell it on the open market to the highest bidder. We have helped subdivide land so that the original deed holder could maintain ownership of portions of the land while moving other portions of the land into communities of color. You can give land and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. We work with landowners to bequest land so that they might enjoy the land throughout their lifetime, knowing that once they pass away, that land will then go to the communities that they have identified specifically for the use of regenerative agriculture and housing. You can give land and it doesn't have to happen today. But best of all, in my work, I have worked with white people to give land as acts of reparations. I have seen landowners return land as a way to repair and to heal. Not just others, but themselves and the land. There are so many reasons to move land into the hands and hearts of those who have been excluded from, and there are so many ways to do it. You see, this work is not just about looking backwards at past harms. This work is also about looking forward to see what is needed to build beautiful communities, healthy food systems, healthy people, and thriving ecosystems. We have worked with white landowners who want to give land as acts of reparations, taken in that full donation of land, built relationship and trust with communities of color, and then moved that land donation into localized common structures that hold land for long-term, secure, affordable, equitable tenure for farmers of color to grow food for their communities. If you want to give land, but also want to ensure that there are legal protections surrounding its stewardship and use long into the future, there are ways. Full donations of land can build relationship and trust with the communities who receive it. The act is a true gift of land legacy. And when given to communities of color, can create durable and profound examples of justice. In addition to food security and general improvement of overall quality of life, I have seen full donations go on to become the building blocks of economic opportunity for the farmers of color who were given access, equity, and tenure to land. I have seen that economic opportunity lead to increased education and also the ability to acquire additional land for themselves, meaning that those people of color were then able to go and build generational wealth for themselves. I have seen this happen. These stories and examples that I share here did not just benefit and improve the people of color who were the beneficiaries of this radical land reform work. It also helped to heal the white people who were the ones stepping up to let go of their land and wealth in the name of justice. Racism is killing us all. It does not just hurt the oppressed. It hurts the oppressor too. Racism is separating us from each other and from the land, and it is allowing colonial capitalism to continue its work of extraction, exploitation, and commoditization. White people feel the pains of historic harms and systematic racism too. And acts of reparations? That's the most healing medicine there is. And what else do these acts of reparations do? In addition to being a gift that changed lives on the receiving end, and beyond mending the hearts of those willing to forego market prices and profits that are available to them through land ownership, these stories catalyzed movements and inspired change. Neighbors and community members saw what they did and they were inspired by it. They were moved by it. They were then compelled to start thinking about land and power and wealth and racism and reparations in new ways. News organizations and media outlets started lifting up their stories, interviewing them, and spreading the word nationally. And why? Why so much interest and attention in, essentially, a deed transfer? Land changes hands all the time. Land is bought, sold, and inherited every single day in every single town across this country. So why so much amazement at a change in land ownership that redistributed land in more equitable ways? Because so few people do it. Because it goes against the trends, practices, and institutional structures that have been set up and that are working to erase all land ownership by those of color. Most land is sold on the market for as much as the market will bear, or passed on to heirs. Okay. Some land gets a conservation easement first and then is sold for as much as the market will bear, or passed on to heirs. But given to non-family for no money, given to people of color who own less than 2% of this nation's land, unheard of. And just to be clear, these stories and examples are simply landowners who make a different choice about who will own the land after they do. These are normal people, everyday people. People who have just enough money to live modestly and who want others to be able to live in the abundance that Earth has to offer too. This feels like a very important part of this work to share here because it is so disempowering to think that we all have to wait on some big wealthy donor to come and change and fix everything for us. And it isn't true. Normal people, everyday people, middle and even lower wealth people can make big, impactful change through collective action and individual decisions. And I have seen this happen. I have seen it happen in communities that come together to raise money for land held in common, and I have seen it in landowners who are brave enough to let go of land and wealth in service to the betterment of humanity. I tell you all of this to say, we need to change institutions and structures that control land and capital. We need to move wealth and power to Black and brown people and communities. We need to let go of land and give it to Black and brown people and communities. And we need to start with ourselves. Individual action for land justice by white landowners is what is needed to move land into Black and brown control and ownership, and to begin to rectify the injustices and inequities that we see today. And so I ask you now, what kind of world do you want to live in? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to be remembered for? I want to live in a world where land ownership statistics are no longer a source of division and inequality, but are instead a symbol of our collective commitment towards a more just and equitable world. And I know that through our individual decisions, together, we can show the world new possibilities for what land justice can really be.